He basically just created brown shirts out of the Proud Boys last night.
President Trump caused a furor in his debate with Joe Biden when he refused to outrightly repudiate the white supremacist group, the Proud Boys, sending a message to them to instead stand back and stand by. What is getting somewhat lost in all the discussion is that Trump followed this up with the line that, quote, something has to be done about Antifa. That is the anti-fascist movement, which has been confronting white supremacists with direct action in the streets for years now. And Biden was in no place to defend Antifa, since he himself has called for the arrest of arsonists and, quote, anarchists within the protest movement, and many mainstream Democratic voices have also been describing Antifa as violent criminals. The Proud Boys leaders celebrated the comment all over the internet, taking this as a green light to carry out further acts of violence, especially targeting Antifa. But what is Antifa really? We were able to talk to Daryl Lamont Jenkins, executive director of the anti-fascist organization One People's Project, and George Ciccariello-Maher, an organizer and visiting associate professor of global political thought at Vassar College and author of the forthcoming book, A World Without Police. So the first thing to clear up here is, what does Antifa really stand for, and what's its history?
Well, Antifa, that's how it's pronounced. Antifa is short for anti-fascism, and its lineage goes all the way back to World War II when they was taking on Mussolini and his fascism back even prior to World War II even. I would say also we just morphed into the things that we saw when the Spanish Civil War came into being. Now, what you see today is a continuation of that. It's simply an ideology. It's just simply a belief that you don't like fascism and you do not want it to proliferate in your society or in your world, for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to understand is that anti-fascism is a broad phenomenon, and we should really all be anti-fascists. Not only that, we should all be proud to be anti-fascist. We should be proud to be labeled with the term anti-fascist. And so this makes it doubly strange that Antifa has suddenly become this sort of term of opprobrium in the US that Trump uses to smear his enemies. And this is something that is grounded on historical facts, namely the fact that fascism, organized white supremacy, Nazism, and other kinds of white supremacist organizing do not go away by themselves. They thrive on conflict. They thrive on economic crisis, like the kind that we're living through right now. And they use that to grow and to develop roots that they then attempt to sink into political and economic life, which we've seen over the past few years. We've seen the mainstreaming and the expansion of white supremacist organizing encouraged by Trump. We've seen them in the streets. The Proud Boys were in the streets of Philadelphia just the other day, an openly white nationalist organization that Trump tipped his hat to as their sort of commander-in-chief in the debates.
As it stands with North America, you started seeing groups calling themselves Antifa or anti-fascist as far back as 1989. There are anti-fascist organizations like my own, One People's Project, but that doesn't mean that Antifa in its totality is an organization. And I think that's just them trying to create a straw man of sorts.
There's also an equivalence being made, including from the Biden campaign, between the fascist and the anti-fascist forces, categorizing them simply as violent. We asked our panelists how they would respond to this.
The fundamental and essential difference is that one category believes that humanity is separated into a hierarchical difference between races and different groups of people, and that some are better than others in their essence. And the other side, the anti-fascists, believe that people are equal. These are fundamental differences that you can't reconcile.
I think after last night's debate, it's pretty apparent who the enemy is in that regard, who the real bad guys are in our society. And I think that has been apparent to anybody that had watched that debate, because they're not going after Antifa. Perhaps those on the conservative side are, but no one cares. It's the folks in the general public that saw Proud Boys being mentioned and Donald Trump saying, stand back and stand by. And that's all anybody needed to hear. He basically just created brown shirts out of the Proud Boys last night.
Movement activists and journalists have revealed close ties between these fascist groups like the Proud Boys and many police forces around the nation. This flies in the face of those who are hoping that the police will somehow check the rise of the far right.
That's been a constant relationship from the very, very beginning, when you had police joining organizations like the Klan, like the Black Legion, other white supremacist and fascist organizations. This is nothing new. It continues today. The number of police involved in open white supremacy is clear and obvious. But we should also be clear that the Fraternal Order of Police is a quasi-fascist organization. If you look at what they call for absolute police impunity. They don't want any kind of civilian oversight of what is essentially a paramilitary organization. So while we're incredibly concerned about the Proud Boys and about others, and we should draw attention to the relationship between overt white supremacy and police and the military, we should also understand that these institutions that are upheld and trusted by Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, Joe Biden is of course encouraging the increased funding of the police. These are organizations that carry out everyday white supremacy as well.
Well, getting back to Portland, that was one of the charges that was levied at the Portland Police Bureau, that they were coordinating with the Proud Boys. In fact, there was a time that there was one particular member who was, according to certain chats and texts that they had obtained, he was warning members of the Proud Boys, or in this case, another group that they worked with called Patriot Prayer, that this individual was subject to arrest. There was a warrant out for his arrest, and he probably not a good idea for him to appear at the next rally. That kind of thing. We have seen Proud Boys appear at Fraternal Order police events from time to time. They will denounce them after the fact sometimes. Sometimes. We have even had a Proud Boy serving as a police officer in Connecticut. Wow. Not too long ago. He has since resigned, but the fact of the matter is he was a member of that organization. There was even a fire lieutenant in in a town in Pennsylvania that was associated with the Proud Boys for some time, and when the community cried out and community voiced their concerns about that, the fire department said, no, we won't let him go. We will not fire him. It was his freedom of speech, and we have no other options. What the town did was shut down that fire department, since they had other fire departments in the area. He resigned the next day. That's how concerned people are about this group.
Others say the solution is to be found in voting and electoral politics. But is that the case? Will voting out Trump make the Proud Boys go away or make them any less dangerous? Recent history shows that it is the mass anti-fascist movement that has been far more successful in pushing these organizations back.
That liberalism, that centrism, is precisely a breeding ground for the fascist far right. In its failures, in its inability to resolve these tensions, in its refusal to even understand the reality of these tensions, it creates the basis for fascist organizing. It cannot respond to it. And so people respond in the streets to fascism because that's where you defeat fascism, in the streets. It was the confrontation in Charlottesville that helped to fracture the right, not only because of direct violent confrontation with the far right, but because the right itself could not deal with a broader coalition that involved faith groups, that involved churches, and that involved Black Lives Matter and anti-fascists working together. This is the real kind of coalition that we need to build against these against these movements moving forward.
This is not about just getting rid of Trump. This is about correcting things that were messed up. Whatever he broke, we'll fix, and we will make better. If you want to talk about making America great again, or making America great, period, that's how you're going to do it.